Donor-advised funds, also known as DAFs, are increasing in popularity and many foundations are jumping on board. Yet this method of giving is getting some criticism. While DAFs totaled more than $110 billion in 2017, some organizations are accumulating assets and holding on to them. There is criticism that donors and funding destinations can be anonymous, creating a less than transparent process, and critics of donor-advised funds are suggesting that Congress should regulate DAFs and require a minimum payout. We sat down with philanthropy expert, advisor, and award-winning author Kris Putnam-Walkerly about the current state of DAFs and what growing trends are taking place. This is what she had to say.
My name is Kris Putnam-Walkerly, and I am a global philanthropy advisor. So I advise high net worth, ultra high net worth donors, leaders of grant-making foundations, corporate giving programs on all aspects of their philanthropic giving.
What steps need to be made to make DAFs more transparent?
I don't know that there necessarily need to be steps to make it more transparent because, for example, if you or I wanted to make a contribution to any organization and write a check, we're not expected to disclose to anybody, who's getting that money, right? So why should a donor-advised fund be asked to disclose? I mean, you do see these headlines of, $500 million donor-advised funds being opened, but I think that's really the outlier. Those are the outliers. The vast majority of donor-advised funds are quite small. If I want to make $2,000 worth of donations every year, I could write checks and no one would know. Or I could set up a donor-advised fund with, $15,000, $20,000, and from that make $2,000 checks every year. So why should I be expected to have that be public? I mean, with any kind of questions around whether there should be some kind of policy or regulatory change, I think it's important to first ask, what is the problem that you're trying to solve and how big of a problem is it? And, what would the solution be? And then what are the consequences, positive and negative of the solution? I do think there's some gray areas, like, for example, a large donor-advised fund is an alternative to starting a foundation. And there's a lot of benefits simply because ease of implementation, right? You don't have to create a nonprofit organization and run it. You can just set up a donor-advised fund and the transaction is handled for you. So, if you see a donor-advised fund as an alternative to a large foundation, then there's transparency differences, right? A large foundation you're required to disclose in a 990 tax form who you give the money to. A donor-advised fund you're not. So, I think it'd be worth exploring whether donor-advised funds of a certain size might need additional requirements.
Why do you think DAFs are getting so much attention with this debate?
I mean, there's a lot of focus on it because they're so rapidly growing. And I think that has a lot to do with, these national organizations like Fidelity, Schwab, where, they just have the ability and resources and marketing muscle to, scale.
Why do you think that DAFs haven't worked for every community foundation?
I'm a huge believer in community foundations. I've served on the board of a couple of community foundations. I think they're incredibly important local institutions that help people from those communities give back to the community and play hugely important roles in being a convener of different kinds of stakeholders within a community, local businesses, city government, county government, higher education, whatever, to come up with community-wide change and kind of support and organize change within the community. And a huge value of a community foundation for donors, and I think a value of community foundation donor-advised funds is they know the community. If you give to the community foundation Sonoma County, you care about Sonoma County and you're giving it to that organization, their staff know Sonoma County. They live in Sonoma County, they know the organizations, the nonprofits. They can help you figure out how to ensure that your fund has a lasting legacy in this community that you care about. And, name your community. There's a community foundation for it. I think it has a lot to do with their ability to market. They are also nonprofit organizations and fairly small nonprofit organizations. So you have hundreds, if not thousands, of small nonprofits operating around the country alone by themselves and lacking the, with a few exceptions, the marketing and communications and fund development savvy that, some of these much larger organizations have. I mean, I used to serve on the board of the Community Foundation of Lorain County, which is just west of Cleveland, Ohio. And, great organization and very successful in attracting donors to donor-advised funds and making sure those funds are allocated to the community. But in no way could it really compete against Schwab Charitable in terms of their marketing muscle and the technology that they have to make it easy for donors to give.
Do you think that technology is a defining line between a successful and unsuccessful DAF program?
I think it's one of many issues. I mean, certainly, you want to make it easy for people to be able to allocate funding. You want to have sophisticated and well-designed, communication materials, either, written, collateral, or online. And I think you have to continuously appeal to younger and younger donors or people whose life experience includes more and more technology and are opening donor advised funds. And so I do think you have to be savvy around that. But, the downside of, some of these larger organizations is you don't get advice. You call an 800 number and, who knows who you're talking to. You don't necessarily have a relationship. You certainly can't meet for coffee. And so I think, that value of having a relationship with somebody that you trust, and who can talk to you and who can say, okay, so you're interested in supporting early childhood education. Let me explain what's happening in this county in regards to early childhood education. And here's the 3 ways you can get involved. I think with the larger entities, unless you're one of mega donors, you don't get as much relationship. You don't get as much advising because they're working at volume, and it would be impossible really probably to service their donors at that level, nor would they necessarily know because they're working at a global scale. There's a trade-off between, fancy technology and, trusting relationships and advising.
Where do you see DAFs going in 2019?
I see 3 trends. One is the numbers are going to continue to grow. I don't think there's going to be any shortage, of donor advised funds starting. I think we're going to see continuing nonprofits that are starting their own donor advised fund. I mean, that's a trend as well. A lot of universities, but also, national nonprofits that have created their own donor advised funds, kind of recognizing this is the new reality. We need to be part of this. And, it allows donors to give to their donor advised fund. They can make grants wherever they want to. And in many cases, there's some kind of requirement that some portion of that funding needs to go to the nonprofit itself. So that, I think, trend will continue to grow. Another trend is going to be conversions of foundations to donor advised funds. I think there are a lot of small foundations out there for which it's a burden to have to manage, to have to staff, or to have to manage the tax issues and the reporting requirements. There's a cost to all of that. And if you're under $5 million in assets, it probably isn't worth it.
Do you think collaborating with other foundations is a good way to decrease administration costs?
I think foundation collaboration is a good idea because you're leveraging assets and leveraging, creativity and knowledge, toward a common good. It doesn't really cut down on overhead, for example, because you still have 2 organizations or 3 or 5, with their own staff and budgets and overhead. But, it makes a lot of sense if there's 2, 3, or 5 foundations in the same community all funding arts education for them to do it, collectively, or at least in some kind of coordinated fashion so that resources are properly allocated. Same nonprofits to submit 5 proposals, they can just submit 1 proposal to your collaborative effort.
Check out our YouTube channel for our full video interview library. That's youtube.com/SmartSimple software.